Welcome to CurioFlux. You ever get that weirdly pleasant, fizzy feeling in the back of your head from a certain sound? You know, like a soft whisper or the crinkling of paper, or maybe somebody tapping their fingernails? For a long time, it was just this unnameable sensation some of us felt. But then the internet did what the internet does. It found it gave it a name, and it turned it into a massive global phenomenon. So today, we are diving deep into the strange and surprisingly scientific world of ASMR.
And look, it is a totally fair question. If you happen to stumble into the ASMR corner of the internet for the first time, you'll see videos with literally millions of views of someone, well, not doing a whole lot. Maybe they're tapping on a glass bottle or slowly folding a towel or just whispering about anything, really. It seems bizarre, right? But this isn't some tiny little community. Oh no, it is a massive worldwide sensation.
And when I say massive, I really mean it. Every single month, just on YouTube, the term ASMR gets searched over 25 million times. To give you some perspective, that's more searches than for things like meditation or yoga. So, what exactly are all these people looking for? Well, they're chasing a very, very specific feeling.
And that feeling has this surprisingly clinical name, Autonomous Sensory Meridian Response, or as we all know it, ASMR. It's usually described as this really pleasant, almost static-like tingle. It often starts on your scalp and can kind of cascade down the back of your neck and spine. Now, it's not goosebumps, and it's definitely not the chills you get from a scary movie. It's its own unique sensation that, for a lot of people, is incredibly relaxing. So what actually kicks off these tingles? Well, the triggers are usually these really mundane, quiet sounds and sights. The big one is whispering or soft speaking. That works for about 75% of people who feel it. But then you've got crisp sounds, like crinkling up some foil, or the slow, deliberate movement of someone's hands. And a really popular one is the feeling of getting close, personal attention, which is why you see all those role-playing videos, like someone pretending to give you an eye exam.
So how on earth did this weird, tingly feeling get such a serious, scientific-sounding name? Well, to really get why it's named what it is, we first have to talk about what it isn't. And that means comparing it to a feeling you're probably a little more familiar with.
You've probably experienced something called Frisson, or aesthetic chills. That's the sudden shiver, the goosebumps you get when a song hits that perfect, soaring crescendo. But see, the triggers are totally different. Frisson comes from big, loud, surprising things. ASMR, on the other hand, is sparked by quiet, repetitive, almost intimate sounds. One is a sudden jolt of thrilling emotion, the other is like a slow, warm, relaxing wave.
The term ASMR itself was actually created back in 2010 by a woman named Jennifer Allen. For years, people on internet forums were trying to describe this feeling, using phrases like brain tingles. Allen realized that for this whole thing to be taken seriously, it needed a name that sounded objective and, a little bit scientific. She figured that anything too goofy might just cause the whole community to fizzle out. And you know what? It worked. The name stuck, and it gave the whole phenomenon legitimacy.
So the community had a name, which was great, but the science still needed to catch up. What is actually going on inside your brain when you get that tingle? Is it just some weird psychological quirk, or is there something real and measurable happening in there?
And that right there is the million-dollar question that researchers set out to answer. I mean, for a long time, ASMR was kind of dismissed as maybe a placebo effect or just another strange internet fad. But then, scientists started putting people who actually experience ASMR into brain scanners to see what was really going on. And what they found was pretty fascinating. In a big study from 2018, researchers used fMRI scanners and found that when people felt the tingles, very specific parts of their brain consistently lit up. We're talking about the medial prefrontal cortex, which is linked to social behavior, and the nucleus accumbens, that's a major part of the brain's pleasure and reward center. These aren't just random spots lighting up. They're the same areas tied to some of our deepest, most fundamental feelings. Probably the easiest way to think about it is this. ASMR seems to activate the same neural pathways as what scientists call affiliative behaviors. That's just a fancy term for social bonding activities. Think of a parent comforting a child or friends grooming each other. The soft voices and personal attention in these videos are basically tricking our brains into feeling cared for.
And that releases the very same chemicals that make us feel safe, comforted, and connected. It's literally like a hug for your brain.
And these effects aren't just in the brain. You can actually measure them in the body. One study found that when people watched ASMR videos, their heart rate significantly decreased. It dropped by about 2 beats per minute, compared to people watching a non-ASMR video. That is a real, measurable, physiological relaxation response. And there's more. Other studies using EEG, which measures brainwaves, found similar proof. They show that ASMR can actually change your brainwave patterns, pushing them into a state of relaxed wakefulness that's a lot like what you see during meditation. So the science is pretty clear. This feeling is absolutely real, and it's backed up by measurable changes in both your brain and your body.
So, with science starting to prove that this whole thing was legit, it was only a matter of time before ASMR exploded out of those niche YouTube channels and went completely mainstream. What was once kind of a secret password for a small online community was about to become a global marketing phenomenon.
And the rise was incredibly fast. After getting its name in 2010, it sort of simmered online for a few years. But then in 2017, IKEA dropped this weirdly captivating 25-minute-long ASMR ad. By 2019, it hit the Super Bowl, with Zoe Kravitz whispering into a microphone for a beer commercial. And just 2 years after that, it was the second most searched term on all of YouTube. ASMR was officially everywhere.
And as the audience grew, so did the army of creators, or ASMRists as they're called. Just look at this. The number of ASMR channels on YouTube literally doubled every single year between 2016 and 2018. It was just this exponential explosion of content, with people finding more and more creative ways to trigger those tingles.
And it wasn't just beer and furniture companies either. Even giant tech companies like Apple jumped on the bandwagon. They released a whole series of shot on iPhone ads that were pure ASMR, just focusing on quiet, satisfying sounds from nature, like rain hitting a tent or the sound of someone crunching through sand. Brands quickly realized that in a world of loud, flashy advertising, sometimes a whisper is way more powerful. Okay, so we've looked at the science, we've seen the cultural explosion. But this brings us all the way back to a pretty fundamental question. Can you feel it? Because it turns out, not everybody can.
While the exact numbers vary a bit from study to study, most estimates suggest that somewhere between 20 and 40% of us can actually experience ASMR. So if you've been watching this entire thing thinking, I have no idea what they're talking about, you're actually in the majority. But for a pretty significant minority, this is a powerful and very, very real experience.
So what makes that group of people different? Well, scientists have been trying to figure out if there's an ASMR personality. Some of the early research suggested that people who get the tingles tend to score higher on a personality trait called openness to experience, which kind of makes sense. They're more open to new feelings. They also found a possible link to higher scores in neuroticism, which suggests that maybe people who are more prone to anxiety are also more sensitive to these super calming triggers. But, and this is important, the science here is still really young. Other studies have found no link at all, so the jury is definitely still out on this one.
And that kind of leaves us with one final big thought. In a world that feels increasingly digital and maybe a little isolating, millions of people are turning to videos of complete strangers whispering just to help them relax, de-stress, and fall asleep. So is this just a weird internet quirk? Or is ASMR tapping into something much, much deeper? A fundamental, biological need for care and connection that maybe our modern lives don't always provide. It might just be that the internet's weirdest sensation is also one of its most profoundly human.